What is Thanksgiving? Is it a harmonious feast shared between Pilgrims and Native Americans, is often portrayed in our collective memory? Or does it mark the beginning of a darker saga, one that some would call the onset of a genocide? This holiday, shrouded in myth and celebration, carries with it a history that is as complex as it is contested. Today, we peel back the layers of Thanksgiving, tracing its origins from the 17th century to its evolution into a national holiday. Prepare to uncover the raw and unvarnished truths as we present a history that challenges the familiar narrative, revealing the profound heritage about a day that is both revered and mourned. The Pilgrims, part of a sect that sought to separate from the Church of England, opposed the Church's elaborate ceremonies and structure, which they believed strayed from biblical teachings. They envisioned a church that was autonomous, where the congregation followed a simpler form of worship based directly on Scripture. Their radical beliefs were not just a religious stance, but a political challenge to the intertwined authority of church and state, leading to their persecution and eventual flight from England. Across the ocean, the Wampanoag people had lived for millennia with a deep connection to the land. They, along with other tribes, had complex societies with established trade networks, diplomatic alliances, and at times, fierce conflicts. The Wampanoag had been trading with Europeans for decades, but the arrival of the Pilgrims was a turning point. Squanto, a Wampanoag, who had been enslaved and taken to Europe before returning home, played a crucial role in mediating between the two groups. In this era of exploration and conquest, the interactions between Europeans and Native Americans were varied, ranging from mutually beneficial trade to violent conflict. Both sides were complex, with their own values and practices that could seem foreign and, at times, cruel to the other. Native American tribes had their own forms of warfare and justice, which could include acts that were brutal by European standards. Captives could be subjected to ritual torture, which served as a form of social catharsis and a means of reinforcing tribal solidarity in the face of loss. Yet, it's crucial to understand these practices within their cultural context, which was marked by a deep spiritual connection to the land and a rich tradition of storytelling and oral history. As we delve into the past, it's essential to remember that history is seldom black and white. The moral judgments of today cannot be neatly applied to a time of survival and conquest, where the concepts of good and evil were as fluid as the change in tides. The story of Thanksgiving is a tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of courage, desperation, alliance, and conflict. The Pilgrims, part of a radical Puritan faction, sought not just to purify the Church of England but to separate from it entirely. Their quest for a pure form of worship, unencumbered by what they saw as the corrupting influence of the established church, was a direct challenge to the religious uniformity imposed by King James. Their dissent was not merely theological, but also a political act of defiance against the intertwining of church and state power. In Leiden, the Pilgrims found the religious autonomy they craved, but their time in Holland was marked by economic hardship and cultural isolation. The Dutch society was more liberal and commercially focused than they were accustomed to, and the Pilgrims feared the erosion of their religious values and English identity. This concern, coupled with the desire to evangelize in a new land, propelled their decision to embark on the perilous journey to America. The agreement known as the Mayflower Contract with merchant adventurers was a pragmatic step, but it also reflected the Pilgrims' commitment to community and mutual responsibility. The contract stipulated not only the financial arrangements, but also the collective welfare and governance of the colony, setting a precedent for a community-oriented approach to colonization. The 66-day journey of the Mayflower is emblematic of the Pilgrims' resilience. The ship, designed for cargo rather than passenger transport, was ill-suited for the voyage, and the conditions on board were dire. Yet, the Pilgrims' steadfast faith and communal bonds sustained them through the trials of the Atlantic crossing.
Journal entry, William Bradford. Being thus arrived in a good harbour and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean.
Drafted as a response to dissent among the passengers, the Mayflower Compact was a seminal document in the history of democratic governance. It established a framework for self-governance and collective decision-making, principles that would echo through American history. The Compact's assertion that government derives its powers from the consent of the governed was a radical idea that would influence future democratic charters, including the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The selection of Plymouth as the settlement site was a critical decision. The area's cleared fields and running streams presented an inviting landscape for the weary travelers. The absence of the Patuxent, victims of an epidemic brought by Europeans, was a tragic stroke of fortune for the Pilgrims. It provided them with a cleared land to settle, which they saw as divine providence. Importantly, the Pilgrims did not arrive with the intention of causing harm or conflict with Native Americans. They were largely unaware of the complex societies they were about to encounter, and did not foresee the future consequences of their settlement. Their first winter was a brutal test of survival, with nearly half the colonists perishing. Yet those who survived laid the foundations for a community that would endure, embodying the ideals of self-reliance, faith, and democratic governance.
Journal entry, William Bradford. That which was most sad and lamentable was that in 2 or 3 months' time, half of their company died, especially in January and February, being the depth of winter and wanting houses and other comforts, being infected with the scurvy and other diseases which this long voyage and their inaccommodate condition had brought upon them.
The interactions between Native Americans and the Pilgrims were complex and multifaceted. While some Native Americans, like Squanto and the Wampanoag tribe, chose to assist the Pilgrims, teaching them vital survival skills, others viewed the newcomers with suspicion and hostility. These varying degrees of acceptance and animosity were influenced by a multitude of factors, including previous encounters with European explorers, traders, or slavers, which had sometimes been exploitative or violent. The diversity of responses to the Pilgrims can be understood against a backdrop of intertribal dynamics and the impact of European colonization. Some tribes saw alliances with Europeans as a strategic advantage against rival groups, while others recognized the threat of land loss and cultural erosion that these new settlers represent. The history of Native American and European interactions prior to the Pilgrims' arrival set the stage for a cautious and, at times, adversarial relationship. Samoset was an Abenaki Sagamore and the first Native American to make contact with the Pilgrims of Plymouth Colony. He startled the colonists on March 16, 1621, when he walked into Plymouth Colony and greeted them in English, which he had learned from English fishermen who came to fish off Mohegan Island. Samoset played a crucial role in the early interactions between the Native Americans and the Pilgrims. He introduced the Pilgrims to Squanto. In a journal entry by Edward Winslow, one of the Pilgrim leaders, he recounts the first encounter with Samoset.
An Indian came boldly amongst us, speaking English. He very boldly came all alone and along the houses straight to the rendezvous, where we intercepted him, not suffering him to go in, as undoubtedly he would, out of his boldness.
Massasoit was the sachem or leader of the Wampanoag Confederacy, a group of Native American tribes in what is now the southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island area during the early 17th century. His name, Massasoit, was actually a title, meaning great leader. A record from the Pilgrims details their diplomatic engagement with Massasoit.
We began to trade with him, and found him a very lusty man. Thereafter he sent us word of the plots of the Narragansets, a rival tribe which we did believe was true.
As the chill of December 1620 set in, the Pilgrims found themselves in a world far removed from anything they had known. The Mayflower, their vessel across the tumultuous Atlantic, remained anchored within sight, its presence a stark reminder of their isolation. With no time to waste, the men began constructing the first structures. The common house, a simple yet vital building, rose from the ground, serving multiple purposes: a place of worship, communal meetings, and shelter against the harsh elements. The first winter was merciless. The settlers battled cold, disease, and a scarcity of food. The general sickness took a grim toll, claiming the lives of nearly half the Pilgrims, including their first governor, John Carver. Yet, amidst the sorrow and loss, the Pilgrims' resolve did not waver, and clung to their faith and to each other. Their determination fueled by the Mayflower Compact's promise of a new society based on collective agreement and self-governance. A pilgrim writes in their journal,
We buried our dead on the hill, marking no graves, lest the Indians perceive our numbers diminished. Yet we remain steadfast, our covenant with God and one another, our solace in this wilderness.
The Pilgrims' endurance through that first winter laid the groundwork for their community. It was a testament to human resilience and the power of a shared vision for the future. The first year of the Plymouth settlement was marked by a relentless battle for survival. The Pilgrims faced not only the brutal New England winter, but also internal strife as they struggled to establish a communal way of life. Their initial system of labor and provision, where all worked for the common good and shared equally in the harvest, led to tension and discontent. Some felt the burden was not equally carried, and as the winter claimed lives, the strain on the community grew. The seeds they brought from England failed to thrive in the stony New England soil. The Pilgrims watched in despair as crops withered, their hopes for a bountiful harvest diminishing with each passing day. The Mayflower, their link to the Old World, remained anchored offshore, a constant reminder of the home they had left behind. Its presence was both a comfort and a symbol of their isolation, as they were forced to keep it anchored due to the lack of a suitable harbor and the necessity of its supplies. A pilgrim writes in his journal,
Our provisions being spent, and we looking daily when our ship should go for England, we began to gather our small harvest, having no more but a little corn which we set with our own hands, and it prospered very well.
The death of their original governor, John Carver, added to the colony's challenges. William Bradford, stepping into the role, faced the daunting task of guiding a community in mourning on the brink of collapse. It was in this crucible of hardship that the Pilgrim's story would intertwine with that of the Native Americans, a meeting that would prove pivotal to the survival of the settlement. The region where the Pilgrims settled was not a monolithic territory governed by a single entity, but a mosaic of various tribes, each with its own culture, leadership, and alliances. The Wampanoag Confederacy, under the leadership of Chief Massasoit, was a dominant force in the region. The Confederacy was a loose alliance of several tribes, including the Patuxet, whose land the Pilgrims now occupied. The Wampanoag were known for their sophisticated political structures and active trade networks. The Patuxet, a band within the Wampanoag Confederacy, had been decimated by disease brought by earlier European explorers. Their numbers were so reduced that they ceased to exist as a distinct group by the time the Pilgrims arrived, leaving their land effectively unoccupied. To the north and east were the Abenaki, a larger grouping of tribes known for their fierce independence. The Abenaki's initial interactions with the Pilgrims were cautious but curious, leading to the first English-speaking Native Americans grading to the settlers. The Narragansetts, the Wampanoag's powerful rivals to the west, had not been as severely affected by the epidemics. Their strength intact, they posed a significant threat to the Wampanoag, which partly motivated the latter's alliance with the Pilgrims. In this intricate tapestry of tribal politics, alliances were crucial. The Wampanoag's decision to ally with the Pilgrims was a calculated move to bolster their position against the Narragansetts and other adversaries. Squanto, with his unique position as a former Patuxet and his connections with the Wampanoag, became the linchpin in this strategic alliance. It was against this backdrop of shifting alliances and power struggles that Squanto made his bold introduction to the Pilgrims. His knowledge of English, gained through his own tragic experiences of abduction and time spent abroad, made him an invaluable intermediary. Squanto's approach was as audacious as it was unexpected. He walked into the Plymouth settlement, greeting the stunned Pilgrims in English, offering his knowledge and assistance. The Pilgrims, wary of the savages they had been warned about, were astonished by Squanto's demeanor and linguistic ability. His guidance in planting, fishing, and navigating the local political landscape was a turning point for the struggling colony. The land that the Pilgrims began to inhabit was not just a wilderness, but a political chessboard, with various Native American tribes maneuvering for power and survival. The Wampanoag Confederacy, under the sagacious leadership of Chief Massasoit, was a significant force in the region. This alliance of tribes, including the now nearly extinct Patuxet, was renowned for its political sophistication and extensive trade networks. The Patuxet had been devastated by diseases brought by European explorers, leaving the lands eerily uninhabited. This void would inadvertently offer the Pilgrims a place to settle without immediate conflict. The Abenaki, to the north, maintained their independence with vigilance. Their initial interactions with the Pilgrims were cautious, yet curious, leading to the first English-speaking Native American to extend a greeting to the settlers. The Narragansetts, a powerful tribe to the west, had not suffered as greatly from the epidemics. Their strength remained a looming threat to the Wampanoag. The Pilgrims, with their muskets and cannons, represented a new factor in the regional power dynamics. The Wampanoag, recognizing the potential of these formidable weapons, saw an opportunity in forging an alliance with the settlers. The trade agreement between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag was not just about resources, but also about security. The Pilgrims' firearms, a technology that the Native Americans had not mastered, became a cornerstone of the Mutual Protection Pact. For the Wampanoag, this alliance meant a deterrent against their rivals, and for the Pilgrims, it promised a safeguard against potential hostilities. Squanto's arrival at Plymouth was against this backdrop of strategic alliances and the looming threat of armed conflict. His knowledge of English and European ways, gained through his own abduction and travels, made him an invaluable intermediary. He understood the significance of the Pilgrims' weapons and the leverage that provided in negotiations. Squanto's approach to the Pilgrims was as strategic as it was bold. He greeted them in English, offering his knowledge and assistance. The Pilgrims, who had been wary of the native savages, were surprised by Squanto's friendly demeanor and linguistic skills. His guidance extended beyond agriculture and fishing. He also helped them understand the military value they held in the delicate balance of power. Following their initial meetings, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe embarked on a path of mutual benefit and cooperation. The exchange of knowledge and resources catalyzed a period of growth and stability that transformed both communities. The Pilgrims, once teetering on the brink of failure, now thrived with the agricultural knowledge imparted by the Wampanoag. Cornfields expanded under the settlers' care, and the storerooms of Plymouth brimmed with a bountiful harvest, while the Wampanoag gained access to European tools and goods. The changes that unfolded were profound. The Pilgrims' adaptation to their new home, guided by the wisdom of the Wampanoag and the strategic alliance they formed, laid the groundwork for a thriving community. It was a testament to the power of collaboration and the willingness to embrace change. Cultural exchanges went beyond trade and agriculture. Social interactions, though sometimes cautious, began to weave a tapestry of shared experiences. The Pilgrims learned from the Wampanoag's deep understanding of the land, while the tribe acquired new tools and objects that brought novelty and utility into their lives. The evolution of Plymouth Colony was remarkable. From a precarious foothold in a new world to a burgeoning community, the Pilgrim settlement grew in size and sophistication. The construction of a fortified palisade and the establishment of a militia underscored the colony's increasing sense of permanence and security. The Mutual Protection Pact with the Wampanoag, underscored by the Pilgrims' firearms, was a cornerstone of the colony's security strategy. It was a deterrent that ensured peace and stability, allowing both the settlers and the tribe to focus on growth and prosperity. The enduring legacy of this period is one of cooperation and adaptation. The Pilgrims' willingness to learn from the Wampanoag, combined with the strategic foresight of their leaders, transformed a fragile outpost into a thriving community. It's a narrative that speaks to the potential of unity and the strength found in diversity. In the nascent years of Plymouth Colony, the Pilgrims' communal system, an embodiment of their collective agreement, was put to the test. Land and resources were shared, and the fruits of labor were distributed equally among all. Yet this idealistic system faltered under the weight of practical challenges. The communal approach, while noble in intent, led to widespread discontent and a lack of individual incentive. The absence of a direct link between effort and reward led to a decline in productivity, threatening the colony's very survival. Governor William Bradford, confronted with the grim reality of low morale and depleting resources, instituted a transformative change. He divided the land among families, empowering them at the ownership of their labor and its fruits. This marked the dissolution of the communal system in favor of individual stewardship. The impact of Bradford's decision was immediate and profound. The settlers, now motivated by personal interest, tended their parcels with greater care, resulting in a surplus that eclipsed any previous harvests. A settler's journal entry captures the essence of this shift.
Each man might plant corn for his own particular, and in that regard, trust to themselves, and so assign to every family a parcel of land. This change rekindled hope and spurred a wave of industriousness across the colony.
The move towards individual enterprise laid the foundation for economic principles that would later become cornerstones of American society. Plymouth Colony's success became a testament to the potential of private ownership and individual labor within a cooperative framework. Another entry reads,
"This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been."
The settlers' own words reflect the transformative spirit that now drove the community forward. The tangible results of this shift were clear. Fields were abundant with crops, livestock numbers increased, and a marketplace thrived with trade. The settlers engaged in commerce, not only within their community, but also with native tribes and traders from afar. This period marked a profound cultural shift. The Pilgrims, in their quest for religious autonomy, inadvertently pioneered a new economic model. The principles of self-reliance and personal responsibility, born out of necessity, became the bedrock of the colony's ethos and a guiding principle for future generations. As the colony stabilized and prospered, the personal lives of its inhabitants continued to unfold, weaving stories of hope and resilience that became integral to the fabric of Plymouth's history. In the spring of 1621, two such stories began with Edward Winslow and Susanna White, both of whom had faced the profound loss of their spouses during the colony's devastating first winter. Susanna, who had braved the Atlantic aboard the Mayflower with her husband, William White, and their son Resolved, faced the trials of the New World with steadfast courage. In the midst of the colony's harshest days, she gave birth to Peregrine, the first English child born in New England. Her husband's death left her a widow, yet her strength never wavered. Edward Winslow, similarly bereaved by the loss of his wife, Elizabeth, found companionship and solace in Susanna, and together they embarked on a new chapter. Their marriage, solemnized with the simplicity of Pilgrim and Christian traditions, stood as a beacon of hope for the entire community. The ceremony, witnessed by fellow settlers, was a profound affirmation of life and continuity amidst the backdrop of survival and hardship. The story of Edward and Susanna did not end with their vows. It continued with the birth of their children, each one a testament to the enduring spirit of the Plymouth settlers. These births, celebrated by the entire community, were not merely personal joys, but communal triumphs, heralding the future of the colony. In a time when every life was precious, the community of Plymouth embraced each new child with open arms. The survival and growth of these children mirrored the survival and growth of the settlement itself, each new life a step towards the realization of their collective dream. These children, born in the New World, were the first of a new generation, embodying the hope and promise of Plymouth Colony. They were the living symbols of a new society emerging from the wilderness. A society that would one day extend far beyond the confines of their small settlement. The narratives of Edward and Susanna Winslow's children are but a few of the many stories of hope that defined the early years of Plymouth Colony. They serve as poignant reminders of the settlers' resilience and their unwavering belief in the promise of their new home. While hope and resilience were common threads in the fabric of Plymouth Colony, the settlement was not without its darker moments. These stories, often overshadowed by the more celebrated events, reveal the challenges and tribulations faced by the early settlers. The first duel in Plymouth, fought in 1621, between Edward Doty and Edward Leicester, servants of Stephen Hopkins, was a grim reminder of the passions and conflicts that simmered beneath the surface. Their choice of swords and daggers as weapons was a stark departure from the peaceful intentions of the colony. Though the duel ended without loss of life, the punishment was severe. Both men were bound head and feet together for 24 hours, without meat or drink. This harsh punishment was meant not only as a deterrent, but also as a public declaration of the colony's commitment to maintaining order and discipline. A more somber chapter in the colony's history is the tale of John Billington. Arriving on the Mayflower with his family, Billington was known for his unruly behavior. His story took a dark turn when he became the first person in Plymouth to be executed for murder, after fatally shooting a fellow colonist named John Newcomen following a heated dispute. This tragic event marked not only the first application of capital punishment in the new colony, but also its first recorded murder, setting a precedent for the rule of law in the face of grave transgressions. Another peculiar and grim tale is the murder most foul that occurred within the colony. A rooster, an invaluable asset for its role in the settlers' survival, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The incident escalated into accusations and paranoia, with some whispering suspicions of witchcraft, a fear that would later grip much of New England. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the rooster had been killed by a predatory animal, likely a fox, which had managed to breach the safety of the henhouse. This revelation quelled the whispers of witchcraft, but served as a harsh reminder of the ever-present dangers of the wild. These darker narratives serve as a stark reminder of the complexity of life in Plymouth Colony. They highlight the settlers' struggle not only against the elements and the unknown, but also against the darker aspects of human nature. Yet even in its darkest hours, the colony's commitment to law and order, and the community's ability to persevere through adversity. Amidst the hardships and the monumental task of building a new society, the Pilgrims and their fellow settlers found time for laughter and lightheartedness, which were as vital to their survival as their more serious endeavors. The journey on the Mayflower was fraught with peril, but it also had its moments of unexpected humor. One such incident involved a pompous sailor who frequently cursed and belittled the seasick passengers. Promising to cast their bodies into the sea, he was met with an ironic fate when he became the first to succumb to illness, and was, in turn, given a watery grave by those he had mocked. Back on land, the settlers' attempts at animal husbandry provided a source of amusement. A particularly mischievous goat was known to cause havoc, breaking fences, raiding gardens, and even once leading a herd of cattle into the colony's meeting house during a service, much to the chagrin and secret amusement of the congregation. Even the solemn business of governance had its lighter side. During one of the first town meetings, a debate over the layout of the new settlement was interrupted by the sudden and dramatic collapse of a platform, sending several of Plymouth's most dignified leaders tumbling into a heap. The incident, while embarrassing, served to break the tension and reminded everyone that a sense of humor was an essential part of community life. These light-hearted anecdotes provide a glimpse into the daily lives of the Plymouth settlers, showing us that joy and humor were never completely absent from their lives. In the face of overwhelming challenges, it was often their ability to laugh and find joy in the absurd that helped sustain them. In the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims, reflecting on a year fraught with hardship and loss, but now buoyed by a successful harvest, desired to express their relief and celebrate their survival. The feast was a manifestation of gratitude, a common practice in European cultures to rejoice over the bounty of the harvest. The celebration was also an acknowledgement of the Wampanoag's role in the Pilgrims' survival. Without the tribe's assistance, the harvest might not have been as fruitful. The feast was a gesture of goodwill, a diplomatic extension of friendship, and a way to reinforce the alliance between the two groups. Preparation for the feast was a communal effort. The Pilgrims hunted fowl while the Wampanoag contributed 5 deer. The tables were laden with the results of a successful harvest: corn, harvested in the form taught by the Wampanoag, beans, squash, and pumpkins. Seafood such as clams and mussels complemented the spread, along with fruits and nuts. The feast, which lasted for 3 days, was more than just a meal. It was a festival of games, dancing, singing, and, as some accounts suggest, even target shooting with guns and bows, activities that entertained and also demonstrated military prowess. Pilgrims and Wampanoag alike engaged in the festivities. They shared stories, demonstrated dances, and sang songs in a display of cultural exchange. The smoking of tobacco was likely a common sight, as it was a customary practice among the Native Americans and had been adopted by some of the settlers. This shared feast was a rare moment of harmony and celebration between two very different cultures. It was an occasion that transcended the mere act of eating. encompassing gratitude, alliance, and a hope for a peaceful coexistence. As the three-day feast drew to a close, there was a palpable sense of harmony and optimism among the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. The shared experience of the feast had fostered a deeper understanding and a stronger bond between the two groups. Historical record suggests that about 50 Pilgrims and 90 Wampanoag people participated in this landmark event. The Wampanoag guests, who had outnumbered the Pilgrims 2-1, returned to their villages with stories of the feast and the hospitality they had received. This event solidified a peaceful coexistence that would last for several years. The Pilgrims, buoyed by the success of the harvest and the feast, returned to their work with renewed vigor. The alliance with the Wampanoag provided them with the measure of security and the confidence to continue building their community. In the weeks and months that followed, the mutual respect and cooperation that had been established during the feast continued to manifest in various ways. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag traded knowledge and goods, ensuring that both communities would benefit from the alliance. The aftermath of the feast was not just a return to routine. It was a period marked by a hopeful outlook. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag had demonstrated that disparate cultures could come together in a spirit of mutual respect and gratitude. The significant number of attendees at the feast, particularly the strong presence of the Wampanoag, underscored the importance of this newfound fellowship. In the beginning, the relationship between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans was marked by mutual benefit and peaceful coexistence. The first Thanksgiving feast was a genuine celebration of collaboration and survival against the odds. This iconic event, often romanticized in history, did indeed reflect a moment of unity. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe shared knowledge, resources, and moments of joy, laying the foundations for what seemed to be a promising alliance. However, as the seasons changed, so did the dynamics between the two groups. The initial period of harmony gave way to a more complex and strained relationship as the colony expanded and the demand for land and resources grew. The narrative of a harmonious beginning was overshadowed by the subsequent conflicts and struggles. The story of the first Thanksgiving remained a cherished legend, but the later years brought a series of broken treaties, land disputes, and skirmishes that would mar the history of both peoples. Recognizing the full spectrum of the Pilgrim-Native relationship is essential. It honors the initial period of peace and acknowledges the ensuing discord, providing a more complete and nuanced understanding of this chapter in history. The fragile peace that had been maintained between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans was largely due to the diplomatic efforts of Chief Massasoit, the Sachem of the Wampanoag tribe. His death marked a significant turning point in the relations between the two peoples. Massasoit had been a stabilizing force, a leader who saw the value in alliance with the newcomers. His passing left a void that would soon be filled by his son, Metacom, also known as King Philip by the English. Metacom's views differed sharply from those of his father. Where Massasoit had navigated the complexities of this new coexistence with caution and foresight, Metacom faced the growing encroachments of the English with increasing hostility. The death of Massasoit coincided with a period of rapid colonial expansion and a series of misunderstandings and broken promises. Tensions escalated, leading to what would be known as King Philip's War, a devastating conflict that would engulf the region. Under Metacom's leadership, the Wampanoag and their allies launched a series of attacks on English settlements. The war was brutal and bloody, marking a stark contrast to the hopeful beginnings of the Pilgrim-Wampanoag alliance. The war, although eventually won by the English, left deep scars on both sides. It resulted in the near destruction of several native tribes and a lasting distrust between the colonists and the Native Americans. The death of Massasoit and the rise of Metacom had irrevocably changed the course of New England's history. The situation was complex, with alliances shifting and varying degrees of engagement among different English communities. Some, like the Pilgrims, who had a history of relative peace with the Wampanoag, were reluctant warriors, while others were more aggressive in their expansion and defense. Ultimately, King Philip's War was a regional conflict that reflected the growing pains of a rapidly changing New England. It was a war that the Pilgrims, despite their initial intentions of peaceful cohabitation, could not avoid. The war reshaped the landscape of New England, marking the end of an era of tentative peace and the beginning of a new, more contentious chapter in colonial native relations. King Philip's War, often remembered for its brutality, was not a conflict of clear-cut sides or moral high ground. It was a maelstrom of violence that saw atrocities committed by and against every group involved. The war's savagery was not limited to the battles between English settlers and native tribes. There were instances of native tribes, such as the Mohegan and Pequot, who sided with the English against the Wampanoag, Narragansett, and their allies. These internal native conflicts were driven by long-standing rivalries and strategic alliances. And similarly, not all English settlers were united. Disputes over land, power, and policy led to internal strife within and between the colonies. Some settlers, like the Quakers, were outspoken critics of the war and the treatment of native peoples, leading to tensions with their more militant neighbors. The war was marked by acts of extreme violence from individuals on all sides. Benjamin Church, an English colonist, led brutal raids against native villages. On the other side, native leaders like Metacom, also known as King Philip, faced dissent within their ranks, with some members committing acts of violence that went beyond his directives. This was a war where the lines between civilized and savage were blurred. The infamous Mystic Massacre saw English settlers and their native allies burn a Pequot village, leading to the death of hundreds. Conversely, the Great Swamp Fight involved a surprise attack by colonial forces on a fortified Narragansett village, resulting in significant native casualties. History often seeks heroes and villains, but in King Philip's War, such distinctions are elusive. It was a war that saw native fighting native, settler against settler, and alliances that crossed those lines. It was a war where the concept of innocent was complicated, with suffering and cruelty on all sides. This chapter of history serves as a stark reminder that the past is not black and white, but a complex tapestry woven with the threads of human ambition, fear, and the struggle for survival. The brutalities and complexities of King Philip's War have, over time, cast a long shadow over the earlier story of cooperation and thanksgiving between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. These later stories of conflict and suffering have sometimes been conflated with the earlier peaceful celebration, leading to a distorted view of the original Thanksgiving. It is crucial to recognize that the Thanksgiving story, with its spirit of unity and shared bounty, stands separate and distinct from the conflicts that would unfold over the following decades. The first Thanksgiving was a genuine moment of peace and friendship between two very different cultures, a brief interlude of harmony before the eventual turmoil. The conflation of the Thanksgiving story with the later devastation of King Philip's War serves as a reminder of the importance of separating historical events to preserve their individual truths. While the war reflects the tragic complexities of colonial expansion and its impact on native peoples, the Thanksgiving feast stands as a separate testament to the possibility of peace and mutual respect. It is a distinction that is essential for an accurate understanding of the past and its many narratives. The celebration of Thanksgiving today is a tapestry of traditions influenced by centuries of customs and various interpretations. Let's explore the key milestones that have shaped this holiday into what we know now. The first official Thanksgiving proclamation was made in 1623 by Governor William Bradford of Plymouth Colony, marking the end of a drought that had threatened the year's harvest. This day of thanks was not associated with a feast, but was a religious observance involving prayer and reflection. Fast forward to 1789, President George Washington proclaimed the first nationwide Thanksgiving celebration in America, marking November 26th as a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to express gratitude for the conclusion of the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Thanksgiving celebrations varied from state to state until Sarah Josepha Hale, the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb, campaigned for a national holiday. After 17 years of advocacy, her efforts bore fruit when President Abraham Lincoln declared a national day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent father in 1863, to be celebrated on the last Thursday in November. While Thanksgiving has its roots in American history, similar celebrations occur around the world. Canada, for example, celebrates its own Thanksgiving on the second Monday in October, a tradition that dates back to the 1578 voyage of Martin Frobisher and his search for the Northwest Passage. The date of Thanksgiving in the United States was not fixed until 1941, when Congress passed a law declaring the fourth Thursday in November as the National Day of Thanksgiving, a response to Franklin D. Roosevelt's attempt to extend the Christmas shopping season by moving Thanksgiving earlier. Today, Thanksgiving is recognized not just in North America, but also in various forms around the world. Countries like Liberia, which was founded by freed American slaves, and territories like Norfolk Island in the Pacific, influenced by American whaling ships, also observe the holiday. As we draw the curtains on the story of Thanksgiving, we reflect on a holiday that has transcended time, geography, and culture. From the early days of the Plymouth Colony to the modern tables around the world, Thanksgiving remains a symbol of communal gratitude and shared humanity. The journey of Thanksgiving is a tapestry woven with the threads of history, tradition, and the universal human experience. It's a narrative that has evolved, adapting to the needs and understandings of each generation. Today, Thanksgiving invites us to gather, to share in the bounty of the earth, and to remember the ties that bind us. It's a time to celebrate our commonalities, to bridge our differences, and to acknowledge the complexities of our shared history. The true spirit of Thanksgiving lies not in the opulence of the feast, but in the simplicity of gratitude. It's a moment to honor the past, to appreciate the present, and to nurture hope for the future. As we embrace the warmth of family and friends, let us carry the essence of Thanksgiving with us all year round. For in gratitude, we find a common language that speaks across the expanse of time and space, connecting us all in a circle of thankfulness.